Imagine a moment the most beautiful woman in cinema, the one whose face stopped the world, the one whose green eyes shone on screens like flaming emeralds, capable of making a man forget his own name. Now, imagine this same woman, alone in a room at 3 in the morning, tearing the curtains, screaming for someone who does not exist, while doctors wait outside with syringes in hand, ready to put her to sleep before she harms herself. This is the secret that Hollywood never wanted you to know. You know Vivien Leigh as Scarlett O'Hara, the woman who swore she would never go hungry again, standing in the red sunset of Tara, fist raised against fate. You know her as Blanche Dubois, fragile, disturbed, destroyed by men and by her own mind. But what no one has told you is that Vivien was not just playing these roles. She was living them. Behind the 2 Oscars, behind the magazine covers, behind the most passionate and devastating love that Hollywood has ever known, was a woman trapped in an invisible battle that lasted her entire life, against a disease that consumed her from within, against a system that exploited her mercilessly, against a man who loved her deeply and abandoned her in the same way. And the cruelest part of all, the more she shone on stage, the darker the place where she lived when the lights went out became. Today, we will tell the full truth about Vivien Leigh. Stay until the end. This story will forever change the way you look at that famous scene of the wind sweeping everything away. And before we begin, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the bell. Every week we bring stories like this that Hollywood has buried deep and that you deserve to know. November 1913, Darjeeling, India. In a town surrounded by the mountains of the Himalayas, where the smell of tea scented the cold morning air and where the clouds descended to touch the rooftops, Vivien Mary Hartley was born. Her father, Ernest Hartley, was an elegant Brit working in the financial market of Calcutta. Her mother, Gertrude Robinson, was a woman of singular beauty and of a more complex origin than the family liked to admit. It was whispered among those who knew her that Gertrude had Indian and Armenian blood in her veins, a carefully kept secret. For at that time, and especially in the Hollywood that Vivien would conquer decades later, mixed ancestry could be the death sentence of a career before it even began. The system demanded that you be immaculately white, immaculately European, immaculately without history. Vivien was thus a carefully constructed lie from the cradle. At just 6 years old, everything changed. Her parents put her on a boat to England, enrolling her in a convent in Roehampton, far from the warmth of India, far from everything she knew. For 2 long years, Vivien rarely saw her parents. In this solitude of cold dormitories and strict religious discipline, she discovered 2 ways to survive: imagination and the stage. It is said that one afternoon, while playing with a group of classmates, little Vivien suddenly stopped, looked at them with those green eyes that already drew attention, and said in a low voice, as if revealing a sacred secret, "One day I will be a great actress." The girls laughed. Vivien did not laugh. She never doubted that destiny again. But destiny, as we will see, demanded a price she could never have imagined that afternoon of her childhood. In the 1930s, Vivien Hartley was enrolled at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. She was young, brilliant, and had something on her face that stopped people in the street, an improbable combination of classic beauty with an almost unsettling intensity in her gaze. It was there that she met Herbert Lee Holman, respected lawyer, 13 years older, stable, discreet. He fell in love with the young actress with an almost reverential devotion. And Vivien, who had spent her childhood away from her parents and who confused security with love, said yes. They married in December 1932. She was 19. Less than a year later, Suzanne was born. The picture was complete. The young actress had found her safe harbor. Except the harbor was starting to suffocate. It was then that her agent made an apparently mundane suggestion, but one that would change everything. Vivien Holman doesn't sound like a star's name. She rejected all the invented names. If she was to have a new name, it would be a name with a story. She chose Leigh, taken from her husband's middle name, in a gesture that was both affection and a farewell, as she used his name to build the identity that would leave him behind. Vivien became Vivien, A different letter, an entirely new personality, sharper, more mysterious. The name evoked Paris, champagne, and danger. In 1935, in a London theater, Vivien Leigh walked to the center of the stage in the mask of virtue, and the audience was never the same again. Critics who rarely praised first performances left the theater with superlatives they hadn't used in years. She was 22, and she was about to see the face of the man who would destroy and complete her life at the same time. One night, Vivien went to the theater with a friend. It was not the play that caught her attention. It was the actor. Laurence Olivier was on stage, and he had a quality that transcended technique, a presence that filled the theater like oxygen, making it impossible to look at anything else. Vivien turned to her friend and whispered the words that would enter history. "I am going to marry that man." The small detail: they were both married to other people. But when Vivien Leigh decided something, the universe had to rearrange itself. She arranged to be introduced to him. One night after a performance, she slipped backstage with a grace that seemed rehearsed for centuries. They exchanged few words, and then, in a gesture that left him stunned, she approached, placed a soft kiss on his neck, and disappeared into the crowd. Olivier stood frozen, with the feeling that something irreversible had just happened. He was not mistaken. They worked together on Fire Over England, and what had started as sparks became a full-blown fire. But for them to be together, 2 marriages had to be destroyed. 2 children had to lose a father or a mother who chose love over them. The bomb was ticking. Vivien Leigh seemed to have the world in the palm of her hand. And it was exactly at that moment that the shadow appeared for the first time. During performances of Hamlet, where she played the fragile Ophelia, Olivier entered the dressing room and found Vivien in a spiral he had never seen. She was screaming, an uncontrollable fury, her eyes with a strange light, words in an irrational torrent. And then, as if a switch had been turned off, she stopped. She looked at him calmly, smiled, and said something completely ordinary, as if the last 5 minutes had never existed. Olivier stood frozen. What they did not yet know, what the medicine of the time did not know, was that Vivien Leigh suffered from severe bipolar disorder. Manic episodes came without warning, transforming her into an unrecognizable person. Then came the depressions, equally devastating, which left her prostrate for days. She was 24 and already waging a war that no one could see. But there was another battle in sight. This one she chose. As she was recovering from a broken ankle, bedridden and bored, Vivien picked up a book that had been recommended to her. 600 pages of an American epic about war, loss, and survival. Gone with the Wind. She read it in one sitting. And when she finished, she knew with the same fierce certainty with which she had decided to marry Olivier. Scarlett O'Hara, that was her. David O. Selznick was about to make Hollywood's most ambitious film. More than 1,400 women auditioned for Scarlett O'Hara. Vivien Leigh was British, unknown in the United States. When she asked her agent for a screen test, Selznick's response was direct. "She seems too English. Scarlett is the fire of the American South." Anyone else would have accepted the number. Vivien Leigh was not anyone else. Myron Selznick, brother of the producer and agent of Olivier, was convinced she was perfect for the role. One night, while they were burning the old sets of King Kong to simulate the Atlanta fire, Myron took Vivien to the set. The orange flames lit up the Hollywood sky. He pointed her out and said to his brother, "I found your Scarlett." David O. Selznick looked at this tall woman with perfect features, her green eyes burning in the reflection of the flames, and he called for the audition. During the audition, Vivien set the room ablaze. She had within her a duality that no other actress had captured, the beauty of a Southern girl and the emotional brutality of a survivor. The role was hers. But what followed was anything but a fairy tale. The filming lasted for months under brutal pressure. 3 different directors passed through the production. The crew worked up to 16 hours a day. And then there was the question of money. Clark Gable earned 5 times more than she did, even though Vivien carried the film on her shoulders with almost double the work. In nearly every scene, she knew it and bit her tongue. At one point, both she and Gable were convinced it would be a colossal disaster. Fate took pleasure in contradicting them. Gone with the Wind was released in December 1939, and the world stopped. Nearly 4 hours of film, and the audience was glued to their seats. It was a grandeur that completely engulfed people, transporting them to a world they had never known. When the Golden Envelope was opened at the Oscars in February 1940, the name that came out was hers. Best Actress, Vivien Leigh, 26 years old. In one night, she became one of the most famous actresses in the world. But what happened after the ceremony remained hidden for decades. In the car on the way home, after the biggest night of her career, Laurence Olivier took the golden statuette from Vivien's hands. According to Olivier's own son, Larry almost threw it at his wife. He was consumed by jealousy. He, the greatest actor of British theater, had been sidelined that very night, and now he saw the whole world kneeling before the woman he loved while he had to smile and pretend to be just the proud husband. Years later, he would admit with devastating honesty that he had been consumed by a jealousy he should never have felt. It was the central paradox of their lives. They were each other's two great loves and each other's two greatest obstacles. They finally married in August 1940, after both had obtained divorces. The price was too high. Both lost custody of their own children to be together. The ceremony was small, almost clandestine, only close friends with Katharine Hepburn as the maid of honor. The joy was short-lived. The first joint professional project, Romeo and Juliet on Broadway, was a monumental failure. They lost over $100,000 of the time in a production that collapsed within weeks, leaving them financially drained and artistically humiliated. And as the bills piled up, the illness began to grow again. Those who were close to Vivien in the 1940s always described the same thing. She could be the most charming woman in the world, insightful, generous, able to make everyone feel special. And then, without warning, without transition, without any apparent trigger, that woman would disappear. What remained in her place was a stranger. The eyes would change first, not exactly empty, but foreign. Then came the acid words, the insults that struck precisely where it hurt the most, the illogical screams. And then the sudden silence, and the return, and the terror in her eyes when she realized she had lost another piece of time. Her agent described her this way. Her voice became hoarse, thick. But what was most terrifying were the eyes. They became the cold gaze of a stranger. In 1943, during a volunteer tour in North Africa to boost the morale of Allied troops, Vivien completely collapsed. Doctors diagnosed her with tuberculosis. They treated her, or thought they had treated her. In reality, as she and those around her would realize decades later with horror, the illness had never been completely eradicated. It had simply retreated into a dark corner of her lungs, waiting patiently, waiting for the right moment to return. When Vivien tried to resume her career, Hollywood welcomed her with a smile that hid teeth. Contracts bound actresses to a single studio for years. The studio decided what roles they could play, what interviews they could give, with whom they could be seen in public. Women were properties. Vivien tried to get into Rebecca, directed by Olivier himself. The role went to Joan Fontaine. She turned down Pride and Prejudice, a decision she would regret for years. Each refusal was a point marked against her, each failure amplified and documented to diminish her negotiating power. And then, in 1945, during the filming of Caesar and Cleopatra, the tragedy occurred that broke her in a way no camera could capture. She was pregnant. In a slip on the polished studio floor, she fell. She lost the baby. She had sacrificed custody of her daughter to be with Olivier. She had given everything for their love. And now, even that baby, his baby, their baby, had not survived. The shock plunged her into a depression lasting several months. And in that depression, bipolarity found the most fertile ground it had ever had. Olivier tried. The letters he wrote during that time reveal a man truly terrified by the woman he loved, not by the illness itself, but by his inability to reach her, to cross that glass wall that the illness erected around her. Tennessee Williams had written the most disturbing and beautiful play of contemporary American theater. A Streetcar Named Desire The role of Blanche Dubois, a refined woman who had lost everything, who lived on illusions, who retreated into a glorious past while reality destroyed her, awaited an actress who understood it not with her head but with her guts. Vivien Leigh understood Blanche Dubois in the most intimate way possible, because Blanche was her. The fragility behind the elegance, the despair behind the smile, the spirit fleeing reality, because reality was too unbearable. When she took the stage at the Aldwych Theatre in London, the audience remained in sepulchral silence. It was not the silence of boredom. It was the silence of those witnessing something they could not categorize as fiction. The critics were unanimous. Nothing like this had ever been seen. After more than 300 performances, she publicly admitted, "Blanche drove me to the brink of madness." It was not a metaphor. When Hollywood adapted the play into a film in 1951, with Elia Kazan directing and Marlon Brando as Stanley Kowalski, some doubted Vivien could reach the raw American dimension the role required. The camera tests destroyed that argument in 10 minutes. During filming, Marlon Brando, already considered the greatest talent of his generation, even confessed in private conversations an attraction to her that he stifled out of respect for his friendship with Olivier. Brando would describe Vivien Leigh as the most complete actress I have ever worked with. A compliment that, coming from Brando, was worth more than any award. She won her second Oscar, Best Actress. A Streetcar Named Desire, Vivien Leigh, twice, 2 roles, 2 golden trophies, and none of them could save what was collapsing. Elephant Walk. The technicians began to realize that something was wrong from the very first days. Vivien appeared backstage with eyes too bright or too dim. She forgot her lines, not from lack of study, but because the thread connecting what she knew to what she could do had disconnected somewhere in the middle. Paranoia set in. The insomnia which had accompanied her for years reached a clinically dangerous level. And then the hallucinations began. Paramount had no choice. They replaced her with Elizabeth Taylor. For Vivien, being replaced by Elizabeth Taylor was a humiliation of almost poetic cruelty, the new queen of beauty pushing the old queen off the throne. And then something happened that witnesses could never forget. On a flight back to Los Angeles, high in the sky with the ocean below, Vivien Leigh repeatedly tried to open the airplane door. She had lost touch with reality. When she landed in England, Olivier made the most painful decision of his life. He committed her. 3 months in a psychiatric clinic. And there, she was subjected to the treatment that medicine of the time considered the cure, electroshock therapy. The most famous woman in the world, the Scarlett O'Hara of the generation, lying on a bed with electrodes on her skull, her body convulsing in response to the electric current that the doctor hoped would reset what was broken. The worst of all, the press found out, and treated the collapse in the way the press treated everything at the time, as entertainment. The headlines turned suffering into sordid curiosity. Clinical details were revealed by anonymous sources. There was no privacy for women that Hollywood elevated too high, because the higher you rise, the greater the satisfaction when you fall. The return from hospitalization was a return to a different home. Olivier and she stayed together. They continued to work together, to share the stage, to share life. But there was something between them that was no longer the same, a distance maintained by caution, a silent calculation of how much each could give to the other before the bill exceeded the available resources. During this time, a young Australian actor named Peter Finch entered their lives. Olivier himself had discovered him and invited him into the company, excited by the talent he saw in him. What he had not anticipated was that Finch would quickly cross the line and become his own wife's lover. According to several close reports, Olivier even felt a perverse relief about it. At least when Vivien was with Finch, she was not unloading her manic episodes on him. It was the portrait of a marriage that had turned into survival. In 1956, another miscarriage, at 44 years old, during a European tour of Titus Andronicus, playing a character literally mutilated scene after scene. Reality and fiction melted into a cauldron that no mind, let alone one already struggling for 2 decades with bipolarity, could bear. There are reports that she wandered naked in a public garden during a manic episode, that she attacked Olivier with a wet towel, provoking him until he pushed her out of the room. After that episode, Olivier sat in a chair and stared out the window for a long time. He loved Vivien. He had always loved her, but he was exhausted in a way that love could no longer heal. Joan Plowright, a young, quiet, and stable actress, offered him something that Vivien could never give him: peace. And Olivier, who had lived nearly 20 years on the edge of a volcano, chose peace. In 1960, they divorced. Later, much later, Olivier would say in an emotional voice that he had never loved any woman as he had loved Vivien Leigh, and that this love had been, simultaneously, the most beautiful and the most destructive thing in his life. "The hard truth," said a close friend who requested anonymity, "is that their love was real. But real love is not enough when the illness is greater than the two together." After the divorce, some expected Vivien Leigh to disappear. She refused. She found in Jack Merivale, a younger actor with seemingly unlimited patience, someone who loved her without trying to change her. Merivale knew exactly what he would find by her side. He had personally promised Olivier that he would take care of her for the rest of her life. And he kept his promise. Under his care, Vivien found a fragile but real balance. She returned to the stage, toured internationally, continued to be what she had always been, a presence that transformed the air around her. In 1963, on Broadway, she starred in the musical Tovarich. The truth is that it was a technical disaster. She forgot her lines in the middle of scenes, sang at impossible speeds as if her internal metronome was overheating, physically attacked a colleague during a rehearsal in front of witnesses. There were nights when she needed to be sedated to avoid injuring herself before going on stage. And yet, and this is one of the most devastating ironies of this story, she won a Tony Award. The jury saw what the public saw. Beneath all this chaos, there was a genius surviving intact, an actress whose connection with the audience transcended any technically perfect performance. Vivien Leigh was winning awards while her mind fragmented. In 1965, during the filming of Ship of Fools, she lost control during a confrontation scene and struck actor Lee Marvin with the heel of her shoe, leaving him with a permanent scar on his face. Ship of Fools would be the last film of her career. She was 52 years old. Summer 1967, tuberculosis returned. Not as a surprise, there had been signs for months: the cough that wouldn't relent, the deep fatigue that rest wouldn't soothe, the pallor that makeup could no longer hide. But Vivien continued to make plans. She had a new role in rehearsal. She had a tour scheduled. She had the life she had always lived, in motion, on stage, under the spotlight. On the night of July 7, 1967, Jack Merivale left their apartment in London for a few hours. Upon his return, he called for her. Silence. He found her on the bedroom floor. Vivien Leigh had died alone, in the dark, with lungs that tuberculosis had finally conquered. She was 53 years old. When the news spread, Laurence Olivier, although they had been divorced for 7 years, although he was married to Joan Plowright, despite all the water that had flowed under the bridges, immediately went to the apartment. With Merivale, he arranged the funeral. He attended the cremation and scattered her ashes near the lake of the property she had loved, at Tickeridge Mill, where they had spent some of the happiest years of their lives together. That night, all the theaters in London turned off their lights for an hour of darkness in tribute to the woman who had filled the stage with light for 3 decades. And Olivier, many years later, already old and fragile, was found watching one of her films, crying. When someone asked him what it was, he said softly, almost to himself, "It was love." What remains of Vivien Leigh half a century later? Scarlett O'Hara remains standing against the red sky, fist in the air, swearing she will never be hungry again. Blanche Dubois remains saying, with a heartbreaking fragility, "I have always depended on the kindness of strangers." The 2 Oscars remain. The scenes in London and New York, where she entered and made the world hold its breath, remain. But there's also something else, something harder to inscribe on a golden plaque. The story of a woman who fought against an invisible illness at a time when that illness had neither name nor worthy treatment, who was exploited by a system that idolized her in public and left her unprotected in private, who loved with a ferocity that could not fit into a normal life, who lost children, lost the love of her life, lost pieces of her own mind, and yet returned to the stage time and again because the stage was the only place where she felt whole. She once said, "I would rather have a short life with Larry than a long life without him." She had the short life, she had the love, she had the stage, and she had the prize, whole, without reduction, without currency. Vivien Leigh was not just an actress, she was proof, dear, bloody, brilliant, that true talent survives almost everything. Almost. Thank you for staying until now. If this story has touched you, if you have begun to know Vivien Leigh in a different way, do one simple thing. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications. Every week we bring stories like this, those that Hollywood has buried, that studios preferred never to tell, about the women and men who paid the price of greatness with blood and silence. Beneath every icon, there is a human life. Until the next video.